So how do we feel about good old Drew Lock, Seattle Seahawks quarterback 1? I actually think there's some interesting stuff with Lock. I really do, and I'm not willing to just throw him out necessarily. I like the idea of a quarterback-needy team going out and adding Drew Lock and taking a chance on him. I think that actually makes some sense. Now, the Seahawks weren't a quarterback-needy team, so that's the other weird thing. But in a vacuum, I think Drew Lock is a positive asset, and I'm interested in him. I'm not willing to just say he sucks just because that's what the meme is. And it's worth mentioning, we've barely seen Drew Lock play. In the past 2 seasons, these are his snap counts and overall attempts. In 2021, he had 233 snaps, only 111 passing attempts, so he actually handed the ball off more than he threw the ball, which is fascinating. In 2020, the ratio wasn't that much better, somewhat better, but still, only 835 snaps, 443 attempts, so a little bit better, still not much. He did also play a little bit in his rookie season in 2019. He threw 156 passing attempts that year. But worth mentioning, I'm not really going to pay too much attention to 2019. He came in as a rookie who was quarterback 2 on the depth chart and kind of just came in and was thrown into the fire a little bit. Weirdly, that was actually his best statistical year in terms of box score stats. But I'm not really as focused on that. I'm more focused on the previous 2 years. But I wanted to start off talking about this just to say, hey, listen, especially the 2021 numbers, we're dealing with small sample sizes. There's no denying that. And as a whole, we've only seen this guy throw 710 attempts. We've seen basically, even though he's been in the league for 3 years, we've seen a little bit over 1 season of him. Now, there might be a reason for that because, he lost his job to Teddy Bridgewater. Maybe it's because he wasn't good. I don't know. But that's just worth mentioning. So, all right, some advanced statistics numbers time. So this is out of 44 eligible players because I had to, it's out of guys who had at least 100 passing attempts because Drew Lock did not actually qualify the 20% criteria that PFF typically uses. These are all PFF stats. And what you see is last year, so the numbers going down the list, big time throw percentage, he was 20th best in that category, so that's okay. Turnover worthy play percentage, he was 14th best, and that's, again, 1 would be the best in the NFL. So that's good, and especially when you factor on his average depth of target was 1st in football. So he's throwing the ball a long way and didn't turn the ball over as much as maybe you would expect him to do. Again, small sample size, but that's good. What isn't good is the next stat, which is adjusted completion percentage, 41st in football. His accuracy just wasn't there, quite frankly. Time to throw kind of, in the middle of the pack there at 17th. And then passer rating and Pro Football Focus grade, both not great. So seems like the real issue was, I would say, was accuracy with him last season. And going over to 2020, where you have a bigger sample size, big time throw percentage, still good. Turnover worthy play percentage, not so much. 37th, that's not good. Average depth of target was 4th, so still throwing the ball a long way, but the adjusted completion percentage is down. And listen, those 2 things might be tied together. Lock constantly taking shots down the field might be tied to why he doesn't get as many completions. That, those 2 things do correlate with each other. Time to throw, again, 14th, kind of where it was earlier. So, again, 1 would mean he holds onto the ball for the longest. So that means that, holds onto the ball for a bit. Passer rating and Pro Football Focus grade, both not great. I think something like this is maybe the most concerning thing with Drew Lock, quite frankly, is the fact that, so this is his passing depth, his PFF grade for where he's throwing the ball down the field. So 20-plus yards down the field in the 10 to 19 range or the 0 to 9 range. And he's pretty awful at all of this. I mean, this is out of anywhere from 42 to 61 total people who were eligible here, depending on which one, where it was in the field. The best he was at was 18th in 2020 at the 10 to 19 range. So maybe you could say, hey, he was solid at that, and then in 2021, he, small sample size, throw that out. But you would ideally like, if you're going to take a flyer on someone, at least him to be good at something. And he wasn't, the best he was, nearly a top half of the league starting quarterback at one specific category for one of his seasons. That's where things get a little concerning to me. Also, something like this, so out of 60 eligible quarterbacks, when he threw the ball, got rid of the ball in under 2.5 seconds, did not rank up too good. This is his PFF grade, 1 throwing the ball in under 2.5 seconds, 44th and 43rd in those 2 years. When he holds onto the ball for over 2.5 seconds, it's better, but not by a ton. 35th and 33rd. So these aren't great numbers. This is an interesting chart, and this is the biggest thing probably in Lock's favor, I would say, just the way I read it. And again, you could, these numbers you can definitely read several different ways. Part of it is how you interpret the data. That's a big chunk of it, actually. But out of 52 eligible quarterbacks, so the passing pressure PFF grade, this is something that is known to fluctuate when you're under pressure and doesn't fluctuate too much when you're kept clean. That's historically how it works. There's obviously some fluctuation in every stat, but really your PFF grade under pressure or your passer rating under pressure, whichever you use, fluctuates a ton. So out of 52 eligible players, in 2020, him under pressure was 51st in football. That's not good, but in 2021, it jumped up to 28. And typically this is something that will jump back and forth year to year. The issue, of course, was his kept clean grade dropped from 18 to 38. However, the kept clean grade is something that tends to be a lot more consistent. So either you believe he got a lot worse, or maybe you just say, hey, he threw the ball 100 times. How many of those, 60 or 70 of them where he was kept clean? We're basically talking about 2 games worth of sample sizes to throw him out. I think it's fair to say he's probably closer to the 18 than he is to the 38 in terms of kept clean. You might argue, well, that would also mean that he's closer to the 51 in terms of under pressure than the 28. But under pressure is something that fluctuates a lot more, so I'm willing to believe that might actually just, be a little bit random and a little bit luck dependent, and maybe he is closer to the 28. That's the way I read that data. You could read it the other way if you wanted. I also think about something like this, and this is definitely something that's hurting Drew Lock, I think, is the fact that the Broncos were a much better team last year than they were in 2020, but Lock got most of his playing time in 2020. You see the, PFF had their pass blocking units graded at 9th best in football in 2021. It was just 22nd best in 2020. The receiving core was middle of the road in 2021, but was bad in 2020. So he also had kind of the worst Broncos team out of the past 2 years that he got the majority of his playing time. So those are the excuses. So the one thing that you can hold out hope for was that he was a mediocre starting quarterback when he was kept clean. The 1 year that we've seen him get significant playing time. The 1 year that he got first team reps in practice, right? So that's the one thing you can hold out hope for. The one thing you can get excited about is that, and I think that, quite frankly, it's worth taking a flyer on. But what I always say about this stuff, I said the same thing about Sam Darnold. Going out and getting Sam Darnold was not a problem that the Panthers, that was not a bad decision by the Panthers. They gave up too much, but the process of, hey, let's take a flyer on a guy like Darnold who has shown promise, and there are some things to like about him, that was fine. Their issue was they said, no, Sam Darnold's our quarterback. We're not even going to consider getting another guy here. The Seahawks need someone else in the room. I think they're going to draft someone. I don't have any inside information, but I feel like they have to draft someone, right? We can't really see Drew Lock going here, but I also think this would be a good idea for hey, Seattle, go get a Baker Mayfield, and then also with Drew Lock, you keep him, and that's where things can get interesting. Where if Baker Mayfield doesn't show up, well, then maybe you can try Drew Lock again and just get more data out of him. You give sort of, maybe what you do is you draft a guy, but you take Drew Lock and you have him play the first 8-9 games, see how that goes, and if it doesn't work out, well, then you put in the guy you drafted. Maybe you draft someone in the second round, because there are some second round talents, I think, here. So maybe you go out and get a second round talent, and then that's the logic. That would make sense to me as well. So I think it's interesting. I think Drew Lock is a valuable asset, but the numbers largely tell me, okay, there's a little something that is interesting to me. As a whole, though, I think these are some bad numbers, and I think that this is something where I wouldn't feel comfortable with having Drew Lock if it's anything but a flyer. That's the way I view it. So there's still a hope. It's not dead, but I'm not gonna get too excited about it. That's what I think. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.